So welcome everyone. So let's get started. The webinar is Managing Change on the Path to Recovery. I'm your MC and moderator, Bob Nagar. Together with my colleague, Rick Stomphorst from Silicon Halton, I'm a founder of a senior HR roundtable for the Silicon Halton, Milton, and Halton region. The town of Milton's Economic Development Department and Silicon Halton, with the support of Wilfrid Laurier and the Wilfrid Laurier University, are pleased to be presenting this webinar. So, our goal today is to provide the business community with some insights and use cases as Ontario reopens its business. So to that end, what we hope you'll take away from this session is, how change is experienced in organizations, inspiration from real-world business success stories, and insights from the emerging research on team management during the pandemic. We're hoping like all of these insights and learning will contribute to your ability, will help you to manage your organizations as you move forward. Okay, briefly, just the agenda for today. So the presentations that we're having. So I want to just welcome our panel, Jean Deszca, Trevor Hunt, who's the director of the warehouse at Gordon Foods, and Victoria Daniel, also from Wilfrid Laurier, are going to be our panelists for today. They all really have very rich bios, and so I'm not going to be spending an extensive time going over that. We're just going to present some very short descriptions, and we'll take it from there. So the first speaker for today is Jean Deszca. Jean is Professor Emeritus at Lizardis School of Business Economics at Wilfrid Laurier. So, Jean, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for joining us today. It's been an interesting journey just preparing for this. I normally would have 3 days or 13 weeks to work with, and having only a few minutes to kind of introduce concepts close and near and dear to, I think, all of our hearts is an interesting challenge. But what I'm going to discuss today very briefly is going to be what I believe are the critical change questions that need to be addressed by anybody grappling with the kinds of issues we're facing right now. I'm going to present to you a 4-phase change path model that will hopefully be helpful to you in thinking about the kinds of things you need to be acting on and doing as you move through the change process. And finally, I want to talk briefly about the underlying messiness of change and the implications of that in terms of how you orchestrate your own change initiative. If we could then move to my next slide. Super. So let's start with the obvious. It's not business as usual, and it's not going to be business as usual. And that's not anytime soon. That's in effect a continuing process because the rate of change is accelerating, the likelihood of disruption is accelerating, and that's not going to change. We live in a highly interconnected world, and this makes this inevitable. Just think back over the last 15, 20 years. .com burst, you've got the 2008 financial meltdown, you've got SARS, you've got the emergence of disruptive technologies, everything from robots to 3D printing to digitization of everything, AI, the list is a long one. And then, of course, competitors that can emerge from anywhere at any time, and now this virus. The reality is that no sector that I see out there is immune. We have digital healthcare now emerging, digital social work and psychiatric assessment analysis emerging as a way of trying to basically deliver aid to individuals who are suffering some of the after effects of this virus. The universities having to quickly learn as they go in terms of how to adjust to the new realities of virtual learning. A process that my fellow faculty members and probably myself have been sort of resisting for some period of time, and all of a sudden it's up there. It's personal. It's not going to go away, and it will change the way things work in the future. So we all need to get a lot better at being able to anticipate what lies ahead and become much more effective agents for change. At its core, as I think about change leadership and management basically involves the addressing of two critical questions. What exactly needs to change, and how can we bring about those changes? So the what question involves the opportunities and risks, and then of course the how is just exactly if those things are real, what are we going to do about them? At one level, this is pretty simple, this is pretty straightforward, but at another level, it's really tough, as you all know, to execute effectively because even modest changes require disruption and realignment of what is currently in place. The bigger the changes, the more things in effect need to get that will need to get disrupted and realigned in order to bring about the path that in fact you're desiring to move forward. Because organizations at their core are basically alignment-seeking systems and processes. So the change path model basically provides some advice in terms of how to deal with some of these kinds of issues. Let's start with awakening. Awakening basically involves, frankly, doing the grunt work, doing your homework. What exactly are the opportunities? What exactly are the challenges? What's the need for change? How big is the gap between where we are right now versus where we need to get to? And what's the vision for the change? Now, you don't do this on your own. You do it through the involvement and engagement of others. But these kinds of conversations have to occur if you are going to gain any traction to do anything. I mean, it's the old problem of if all you're providing is the evidence that the sky is falling, but you've got no path forward as to what the implications of that might mean, that's not going to be very helpful in terms of engaging allies in that movement towards a different state. Mobilization involves assessing the organization's readiness for change and the possible actions you could undertake in order to improve those prospects, assessing systems and processes, and engaging key stakeholders critical to gaining support and resources needed to proceed. So again, doing your homework, thinking about where things are at, thinking about not only the people whose behavior you need to see shift and change, but also the systems and processes that in fact they're going to need to shift and change in order to create that new level of alignment necessary for greater organizational effectiveness. You've got to think about also the whole issue of communicating more broadly the need for change, building coalitions in order to leverage those formal and informal systems and processes in order to try to advance the change. And this involves lots and lots of communication, obviously. Communication to build those coalitions, leverage formal and informal systems, those sorts of things. It needs to be done with careful listening, empathy, and approaches that will engage and energize the folks who you need to basically have as allies as you move this piece forward. As you move into the acceleration phase, you're really talking about putting that action plan to work. Mobilizing and deploying your change teams if you've got some other folks that in fact are helping you move this thing forward, building momentum and accelerating and consolidating progress along the way. It also involves learning as you go. You won't get it right. As the old analogy used to talk about strategies being the first casualty in a war. Well, the same kind of thing happens with a change initiative. You better have your eyes and ears open, learn as you go, because you're going to be making adjustments as you go. And also don't forget to celebrate milestones along the way. Finally, the institutionalization phase actually really begins almost at the beginning because it involves basically measuring and monitoring progress along the way so that you can have signaling systems in place in order to help you make adjustments, managing the transition and related risks as you go, because most changes in organizations involve the interesting challenge of trying to rebuild the plane, well, it's still in flight, if you know what I mean. Things don't stop. You don't basically pull this thing to the side, and you need to also continue to deliver goods and services at the same time as you're undertaking the change. You need to ensure things are now realigned in ways that will support and sustain changes over time. There's a fair bit of evidence to suggest that a lot of things which are seen as resistance to change are actually fundamentally systemic barriers to the change initiative, that in effect are creating actions from individuals that they believe in effect is justified given what those systems and processes are signaling. And then obviously you need to debrief what's been accomplished, celebrate and set the stage for future changes, because change is not a destination, it's a process. So, well, the change path model that I just presented to you basically lays things out in a nice linear fashion. As I mentioned earlier, it's a lot messier than that because organizations are complex, dynamic systems that live within complex, dynamic systems. So this interconnectedness, in effect, makes it a lot messier. You've got changes that, in effect, will be within changes, and change is going to be messy. It's going to contain surprises. So, again, the importance of being prepared to learn as you go and make adjustments as you seek to move in the desired direction. Bigger changes obviously bring with them much greater complexity due to the larger number of people, systems, and processes involved. So you need to be thinking about that. Changes will also evolve over time, meaning you better be smart and humble enough to listen, look, and learn as you go. I noticed an article just came out yesterday in Fast Company, and basically the question they were asking is, why haven't body cams fixed policing? This is in the wake, of course, of the ongoing debate that's going on, I guess, first of all, in the United States and around the world, around policing behavior. And the underlying argument that they make is that until you change systems, change other underlying systems and processes, and fundamentally the culture itself, body cams in and by themselves, in fact, won't be enough to affect those needed changes. So, a couple of quick so whats. In many respects, I think COVID has made change easier right now, just because organizations are awake to the fact that the current models aren't working. Again, easier provided you've got access to needed resources. The organization is awake, and the fact that things need to change is something I think is recognized. So the questions of what needs to change, the vision, and all those kinds of things come into play pretty quickly. And I guess the question that goes with that is this just something we're needing to do in the short term that's going to disappear with time when things get back to normal, whatever normal may mean? Or are we really talking about a sustained change in terms of how we approach our customers and processes and markets and the kinds of things we're trying to provide service for as we move forward in the future? So do your homework, assess the need for change, engage others and provide a vision for the change, nurture and mobilize support needed resources, accelerate your change efforts, measure progress, impact along the way, learn as you go, institutionalize or normalize those needed changes, and work to prepare the organization for future changes. So those would be my initial comments. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Gene. Next, we have Trevor Hunt. Trevor is the Director of Warehouses at Gordon Food Services in Milton, and Gordon Foods is a wholesaler and distributor. Trevor will talk about how GFS pivoted under the realization of a sort of a significant, business loss due to the pandemic. So, Trevor, I'll just stop sharing this.
Thank you, Bob. The presentation is up now, I trust?
Yes.
Okay, so, and I also have to thank the town of Milton and Silicon Halton for inviting me to be a panelist here today. As Bob mentioned, I'm Trevor Hunt with Gordon Food Service, and I'm here to talk about the launch of our Popup Store in Milton. Most people in Milton know who we are, but not necessarily what we do. Gordon Food Service has been in business for over 120 years and is the largest family-operated broadline food distribution company in North America. We service regional and national chain restaurants, independent restaurants, as well as some retail and healthcare establishments. We carry over 18,000 different items, such as many dry goods, frozen foods, fresh produce and dairy, as well as cleaning chemicals and equipment. I'm here today to tell everyone about the journey we've been going through over the past 3 months. I'll share with you the situation we found ourselves in, how we approached our response, and exactly what it is we put in place. It has been such a unique time for all of us. Internally, we thought the best way to describe how we needed to act and respond was with these 3 terms: pivot, nimble, and hustle. The direction of our business was changing rapidly. The food service industry was being turned upside down, and we needed to pivot. It was critical in order to continue moving forward to find our new direction. We needed to be nimble and not be held back by our old processes and guidelines that could only slow us down, all in an effort to continue moving forward. And most importantly, we needed to hustle, make swift decisions, and take action quickly in order to make the best outcome of the pandemic situation. As everybody knows, in early March, a state of emergency was declared in the province, which quickly led to all restaurants being forced to close and essentially cut off the need for buying any of our products. It took a couple of days before they were allowed to open up again and were restricted to only takeout and delivery. The food supply chain was changing. The demand for food was still there, but no longer out at restaurants. Grocery retailers were seeing increases of 50% in sales, while we were experiencing declines of up to 80% in a matter of days. While all at the same time, we have open purchase orders with our vendors, trucks on the road, and inventory flowing into our building. So while retail is struggling with empty shelves, we have millions of dollars worth of inventory filling up our building and nowhere to go. Also, between our warehouse and transportation departments, we have over 800 employees. And now, since our customers were no longer buying food from us, we didn't have much work left for them. And then we also had a duty to respond to all of the precautions outlined by health officials and immediately implemented new safety measures to protect our employees and do our part in reducing the spread of the virus. We began segregating our office, warehouse, and transportation employees, installing extra sanitizing stations throughout the building, and then we also had to make changes to common areas for employees to encourage the physical distancing and stop any over-the-road drivers or any visitors and contractors from entering the building. So in response to all of this, we needed to come up with a new way to go to market. And as an organization that has always been a service to other businesses, we had to figure out how to get our products direct to consumers. We wanted to provide an alternative solution for the Milton community to take pressure off some of the retailers and provide an opportunity for people to get the essential items they need. We had to continue to move inventory through our network, which is not always easy due to the packaging of food service items. At a typical grocery store, you may find yourself out buying flour, which usually would come in a 1 kilogram bag, but we carry them in 20 kilogram bags, which can obviously be difficult for most people to use. So we decided to launch what we call our Popup Store in the parking lot of our Milton warehouse. It was important for us to use as many internal resources as possible, as everyone is being cautious of expenses. We couldn't go externally and hire a third-party company to organize this for us. And one great example for us is that we have an events coordinator in our marketing department here. And since we're in a situation that prohibited any events, there wasn't much work to be done. So we ended up utilizing her skill set to help the setup, web design, and launch of the Popup Store concept. We were able to pull in various people from different departments throughout the organization and came to a solution that utilized our existing ERP system as well as our warehouse management system. And this was all done by launching our e-commerce site and offered many of our products to the general public. For the website, we had to really think about the end users and how easy it would be to navigate. One of the lessons we quickly learned is that the general public did not easily relate to the sizes of our products. So the prices looked really high when compared to retail, but wasn't really the case when you compared it to similar package sizes. We were able to find an off-the-shelf solution for the financial transactions, and then, as I mentioned, using our own people for the web design. It was important to offer household products that we reduced to more convenient sizes, and in particular, offer those hard-to-find items that retailers just couldn't keep on the shelves. I think we ended up selling more packages of yeast in the first week than we actually sold to our regular customers the whole previous month. And we made sure that the website was fully in our own control to be able to adjust and customize regularly as we needed to. For the pickup process, safety was the first priority. Safety of our employees, safety of our customers, and safety of the products. We set it up from the beginning as to be 100% contactless. It was set up like a drive-through service with our employees loading all of the products into the trunk of the vehicle so our customers didn't even have to get out. All of our employees have been required to go through a pre-screening process prior to coming to work and entering the building, and they're also provided with all of the necessary personal protective equipment, such as high visibility vests, gloves, and masks. We utilized refrigerated trucks with temperature logs being taken every few hours, and these held all of the orders in advance to ensure that the cold chain remained intact and none of the items would be compromised. And with all of what we put in place, we've been able to get everyone in and out in just less than 3 minutes total on site. So in summary, we're faced with a rapid change to our industry. We pivoted to move inventory and generate sales another way by launching our pop-up store to the public. In the end, we're able to pull all of this together in just about 3 weeks using only internal resources at very low expense. So I encourage all of you, if you're struggling during these times, consider a different direction, look internally at your people, think about how their specific skills could be redeployed in some other way and still provide value to continue moving you forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. I can relate to your suggestion about the scarcity of yeast for sure. That's quite amazing. So thank you. Next, we have Victoria. So Victoria is a PhD candidate at Wilfrid Laurier University. Her work recently has been with Dr. Zan, and they've been conducting research examining individuals' experiences during this crisis in order to understand the impact on work and family. And we thought that this kind of emerging research, would be helpful and useful to you in terms of, helping your employees as well.
So I'm really excited to be here, to be on this panel, sharing some of our really recent research findings from a qualitative study we conducted with my advisor, Jesse. So first, I'll just discuss a few key insights about employees' experiences, those specifically who shifted to working from home during the pandemic. And then I'll try and discuss some potential recommendations that you could think about for your employees. So when you first look at these, they might seem a bit obvious, like you're probably having these own experiences yourself, but these were really widespread patterns that emerged across different types of jobs, industries, and geographic regions. So the first employee experience was really related to these unique new work pressures that arise when you actually shift everyone to working from home. This is because it's totally different in how people actually do their job, and people are having to do new meetings with virtual Zoom or creating different ways to actually satisfy client needs. And in conjunction with that, when people shifted to working from home, they might have actually not had the resources or support from their organization to be really successful in this shift. So they might have not had technology like the appropriate computer or network, and they might have, had to needed flexibility in dealing with these different demands. So the second big experience that we saw that I'm sure you can definitely relate to is how employees are facing this kind of impossibility of dealing with both childcare and work demands at the same time at home now. So obviously, young children are at home full time, or your spouse might also be at home. So you have to work around these simultaneous demands that makes everything a lot harder. And the fact that there's both new work demands and new family demands at the same time actually amplifies everything and makes it all around a more difficult experience. And then finally, the other interesting thing that we noticed was people are starting to reflect on these new experiences. And they actually talked about ways that they would want to permanently change their work as a result. So for example, they might really enjoy working from home, so they'd want to continue doing that even after the pandemic is over. Or they might even be thinking about changing jobs as a result of this experience. And people also express to us that they expect organizations to change as well. So it's not just changing during this pandemic, but that things will shift in the long term as well. So why should this matter to you? In the present, employees are dealing with so many demands that it can be really overwhelming, and they're just trying to cope without this normal framework of society that we typically have to support us. So this means that people are burning out so rapidly now. And this is really detrimental for employees because high stress for such prolonged periods can actually really harm individuals' health and well-being, but it can also impact their job performance, which is a key consideration for organizations. And organizations' actions during the pandemic can also impact their future with employees because employees have talked about their commitment to their organization in really polarizing ways. So on one hand, we have people saying, my organization handled things so well during the pandemic, I'm really committed to them, they made me feel really supported. But alternatively, we have people describing their organization didn't handle things very well, and they're kind of just waiting things out to go and look for a new job. So these are obviously critical considerations for organizations in managing their employees. And so to finish us off, I'll just talk a bit about some possible suggestions that organizations can consider in mitigating strains to employees' well-being and performance. So I'm just thinking about these in terms of my own knowledge from past research and how these impact the findings. And just know, though, there's really no perfect one-size-fits-all solution. Every organization is dealing with some unique challenges during this time. My first recommendation is really the most concrete action that you could take right now to make sure that employees are going to be successful. And that's addressing any potential resource or support deficiencies. For example, do people have the right technology to be doing their work at home? Do they have computer, monitor, potentially ergonomic equipment? Have they incurred any new expenses on the organization's behalf to do their job? Have they bought supplies, technology? Do they have higher Wi-Fi, cell phone bills? These types of things to work remotely. And I really do appreciate that companies are trying to just survive this time. It's a really difficult time, and managers also have their own challenges and they have reached their own capacity. But investing in people and good management doesn't necessarily mean spending money. I think having a supportive manager is in and of itself a really important resource, and it doesn't cost anything. So being informally supportive can matter a lot to people. For example, loosening productivity expectations for right now while people are dealing with these incredible challenges, or even just like checking in to make sure people are doing okay and providing some flexibility can be more helpful than just a formal policy. And, managers can be really creative with solutions for employees. They don't have to look like what we understand to be conventional ways of working. For instance, if you want to try and support employees who need to manage all these demands with such big constraints, you can adopt some different ideas. For one example is core hours. So if you've ever heard of this, it's taking the absolutely necessary hours of a business day, and then employees can actually do their work during other hours. So for example, from 10 to 3, they're available for meetings or calls. And then whenever is amenable to their schedule, they can fulfill the other parts of their job. And this helps give people more flexibility in scheduling. These types of solutions, though, you really have to gain widespread commitment for them to be effective. So you have to start from the top down, and leadership really needs to model these for them to be useful. The third recommendation I have is really kind of shifting your mindsets when thinking about these. It doesn't look like what we know to be the organization or work before the pandemic. So don't assume what people need. You have to actually go and ask them, get involved with people and what they need. And, involving people in these decisions that affect them can actually really show them that you're trying to support them. Another way you can shift your mindset is from being very short-term focused right now, how do we get through this crisis, to actually thinking a bit more long-term. What are we going to do when the pandemic actually subsides? So if you make adjustments now and at least start planning about how you're going to implement resources, then you can build this infrastructure for your business moving forward. So for example, have you started anticipating personnel-related situations? is everyone in your workforce going to try and take vacation at the same time when COVID is over? Consider planning and staggering people's time off so that you don't have this huge disruption and a massive part of your workforce taking leave at the same time. Ultimately, what's important here is being really proactive and creating a strategy for your employees that will ultimately help the organization and not get left behind in this future of work that we're seeing. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Victoria. That, those recommendations provide some great guidance. I think, the key thing, and I know that most of the firms and employers out there are doing this, but you really reinforce the fact that you really need to engage your employees as you sort of move forward. So, thank you. So now we're at the Q&A segment of the webinar. So we've received some questions ahead of time, and I thought maybe we would kind of start with those. And, some other questions have been submitted as we're going along. And Nitya, I'll ask for your assistance in getting those questions tabled as well. But perhaps we'll start with one of the questions that we received ahead of time. And Jean, maybe I can direct this to you. Mm-hmm. The question is, what is the biggest challenge, in your opinion, to recovery within organizations?
Well, in a 2-minute bite, is that what you're looking for?
Yes. Yes.
Well, I mean, clearly in the very, very short term, although Victoria made a really important point, is the issue of making sure you've got sufficient resources in order to drive the kinds of things that in effect you're looking to move forward. But obviously the resilience and realignment challenges come to the fore as well. I think in the short term around COVID, it's probably easier right now to gain traction than has been the case in the past. I think the interesting and critical question will be what happens when COVID begins to fade and we start to approach something that looks like some new normal, whatever that may well be. Because there seems to be, in my mind, no question that the world has changed and things won't simply drift back. So for me, that notion of what comes next is, I think, a really critical challenge that organizations will have to be thinking long and hard about. I mean, just one example, office buildings. We've seen announcements in the globe over the last little while that some of the firms are saying, gosh, we've learned that we can work remotely. We don't need all this office space. So you got all these towers that have been built over the years, you got other ones going up. What happens to all that space? Obviously, not all of it disappears, but my guess is that their business model is getting disrupted and will be disrupted significantly in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Trevor, as Jean mentioned that, mm-hmm. There is going to be a new normal that occurs after this. Is right about that, like the world has changed. What else are you doing to embrace that and anticipate some of that change?
Yeah, for us, there's, I think, and kind of to go along with the other question as well, is really trying to make our employees feel comfortable coming into work, making sure that we have all the necessary precautions, that everybody can still remain as productive as they can, but they're safe. So really, we're trying to get used to this kind of, I know the term we're using now is the new normal, but I think everything's changing on a weekly basis now. So I'm not even sure we're at that new normal or when that might be. But certainly looking at just continuing to adapt and looking at different various technology pieces and whatever we can to really make our employees comfortable coming into work and that they feel safe. Even just this week, we implemented, these tracking devices that will give us a record when you come within 6 feet of somebody. So if we have to backtrace, we know exactly, we can tell everybody and, advise as needed.
Right. Actually, one of the questions that had come in along the way, I just briefly looked at it as we were doing the presentation, was asking about adaptation. And so, no, that's a really great example, Trevor. One of the other questions that came in is, aside from the pop-up store, which people are sort of moving to, what else has GFS been doing to manage your way through this?
Yeah, another new initiative that we put in place over the past month or 6 weeks or so now is what we're calling our truckload sales. So it's basically taking our Gordon Express or our pop-up store and actually taking the truck and partnering up with one of our customers, a restaurant, or some actually been hotels, and bringing our truck to their parking lot. We actually have a select list of items, and typically right now it's barbecue type items for the summer, and allow our customers to do the advertising and promoting through their own network and on their websites. And then we just show up one day typically on a Saturday or another day of the week, and their customers would then arrive and pick up 100% contactless, just like our truckload or our pop-up store here in the parking lot. So it allows different exposure for our customers, and we've had that going throughout the province.
Right. Okay. So there was another question, and Victoria, I thought I'd direct this to you. And perhaps you've answered some of it through your presentation as well, but I think that maybe if there's anything you would add to it, is the question was, what are some strategies individuals could use to try to cope with stress during this time, or strategies that a family could use to make the situation better? So looking at it very much from the perspective of the employees.
Yeah, I think it's really important as employees are trying to deal with all these demands and everything is so constrained, and we're in this new normal right now, to try and do just at least a little bit of time for themselves to detach from work or detach from, all these demanding things in their lives, and really get some time for themselves. And while we're pretty restricted right now in what you can do, there's tons of activities people are still able to do, going outside, getting exercise. These are all really critical things that people can do to reduce stress. And I think making those things a priority as well will help them a lot in the long run. The other thing that families can do, we're seeing as couples, everyone's in a unique situation, but for people that really were doing well and managing this situation really well, I found parents usually had very open communication with each other, and they set up plans and strategies together in how to manage these things as a family, right? It wasn't on the fly and trying to do everything as they go. It was functioning as a family unit where they could actually make these schedules so that everyone could do their necessary work, or the kids were able to have someone always with them. So I think for a family, it's a matter of communicating a lot and planning a lot. It goes a lot better when it's not chaotic and on the fly. So that would be kind of my two big things.
Thank you. So Nitya, were there any specific, I have some other questions here, but I thought if there was anything that came up.
There have been a few questions that have come up. First, a comment directed at Jean. Jean, you have a former student that is on the attendees list today. And it's all I know is the student's name is Karen, and she's saying you're still a wonderful instructor. So I wanted to pass that on. And then we'll transition to the question that came through, which was from another attendee. And the question is, are there signaling systems that have worked better than others?
That's a question for me. I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yes, Jean, that's a question for you. The question is, are there any signaling systems that have worked better than others?
That is a wonderful question. Certainly some organizations have been playing in advance with scenario planning processes, a variety of different sort of ways of thinking about and looking at the world through alternative sets of eyes and ears. And what this is really trying to get at is Are they basically getting the blinders off, or are they simply zoomed into their current mode of operation? I mean, if I was to sort of do it in the simplest sense, for me, the greatest thing you can do in terms of signaling is that you try to get those blinders off and look more broadly than you typically do in the past. The difficulty that most organizations face is that they tend to be efficiency-seeking entities. They're aligned for they're aligning their goods and processes. They're trying to make them operate as efficiently and as effectively as they can. That causes them to focus their attention on the here and now and not on the what ifs. So work that gets you out to trade shows, reading things you wouldn't normally read, playing with scenarios that might not be front of mind in terms of what may well be on the horizon. Those are the sorts of things that I think help to create improved signaling as you move forward.
Great, thank you. We've got another question here for you, Gene, and it's, are there typical market reactions for these broad global events? There have been several pandemics.
You know something, the answer is yes. Yes, there are. And then, of course, the question is, well, what's the half-life of those? So if we go back to the 2008 meltdown, what did that lead to? A reimposition of a lot of terms and conditions around the sort of the way that the financial community effect is expected to operate as they move forward. So we saw those kinds of reactions at a governmental level as different constituencies tried to kind of cope with the aftermath of what had happened. We saw that with SARS when SARS in fact was starting to fade. We saw an attempt to basically extract as much learning as we could from that in terms of how to handle pandemics as we move forward in the future. The difficulty, I think, is that we tend to have short attention spans sometimes. And as these events start to fade, we also start to fade paying attention to the kinds of signaling systems that, in fact, might be helpful in terms of avoiding those kinds of things in the future, or not avoiding so much as adjusting to them. And we have a tendency to drift back into earlier modes of behavior. That would be my answer to that.
Great, thank you. So Trevor, I'm seeing there's a lot of comments coming in that there are a lot of fans of the Popup Store in the audience here today. So you've clearly got a fan base here. I am also part of that fan base, I will admit. There are questions about, will the Popup Store be a permanent addition to the GFS warehouse, and will it stay in Milton?
At this point, honestly, it's early to say. We hope so. We have been talking about, if we get to a point where we open up our office and everybody starts coming back in, it's going to be tough to find parking there. So we're looking at different contingencies and where else we can park it. And that's why, we're definitely starting up that truckload sale. But we have certainly discussed it. If we happen to not have space here on the property, whether or not we could find another location here in Milton, I think it's definitely something that we're considering making permanent. Yeah.
Great. Now, there was another question that came in specific to the Popup Store, and the inquiry was, have you seen a return on investment on that model as of yet?
Yeah, we look at it really on a weekly basis, and what we found is very quickly, because of how we're able to operate it, we're able to generate enough to cover all of the variable expenses and some of our operational fixes that we already have, with the facility and the equipment involved. So it's very quickly seeing the return on that.
Wonderful. And then I guess our final question will be for all of the panelists. And the question is really speaking to the larger situation. So how can organizations take adaptive actions in response to the current global context with regards to issues around race and the pandemic, as well as the economic crisis? So Gene, could we start with you?
Thanks a lot. Oh my goodness. It goes back to, I guess, the comment I was just making a little bit earlier. We need desperately to get the blinders off. We need to be looking more broadly. We need to be questioning our assumptions and biases about who we are, how we operate, how markets work. because until we do that, we're not going to be in a position to really get a handle on what are some of the alternatives and options that are out there that, in fact, might produce far better outcomes than we're able to achieve right now, because the world is not going to return to the way that it was. Those would be some initial comments. I'm interested to hear what my fellow panelists have to say.
Victoria, could you provide some insight?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it depends what context you mean about adaptive action, like in what way. But I think from my data, in terms of how organizations are responding to the pandemic, we're seeing that people expect change to happen and they expect the certain parts of the change to last. So, you know, organizations really need to get on board with this and be more dynamic and be adaptive, because as Jean said, they've had a hard time changing in the past. And so this situation has created a good opportunity to do so. The other thing I would say is, I don't know if this is the context that the question came in, but you know, if an organization is responding to lots of different social issues, and I would say it's really important to be authentic as an organization. Like, don't do something that's not authentic to your values, to your mission, because I think people sense that. And you know, you have to do these things genuinely. And so if you don't, I don't think it will actually be useful to the organization or to consumers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can just add on to that, I mean, you know, for us, even in some of the actions that we took place, is really being clear about our communication with our employees and the organization's stance on the different issues that are happening throughout the world. And I think, yes, just being clear and upfront about, you know, our culture is a big piece of what we live by at Gordon Food Service. So it's really just being clear with everybody, not dismissing it, and being upfront, because we have a very diverse workforce and need to just be upfront and communicate with everybody and stay true to your values.
Wonderful, thank you. And then we have another question for all of the panelists. And the question is, what can organizations do to maintain the new way and not slip back into their old ways? We've seen a lot of change happening very rapidly over the last few months. And are there strategies that organizations can implement so that they don't fall back into the old habits? Victoria, could we start with you?
Sure. I think Jean's probably the change expert, but I can speak a little bit to that. I think if we're talking about something that employees want to remain, like if a new strategy is implemented that is working really well for employees, I think it's important to make that known, to evaluate it, and so that the organization knows this is really effective and we can't let it slide and we have to keep working at these things. And you know, once you implement something, it doesn't just mean that it will stay forever. You have to continually working at it and keeping it in place and maintaining it. So it is something to be on top of. And Jean mentioned, you know, reinforcing these things and being aware. So I think that would be sort of my main recommendation there.
And Trevor, it would be great if we could get your insight right now.
Yeah. For us, we're continuously changing. And again, making sure that we don't slip back. You know, I think there's a lot of learnings, and I think this is one that we meet on a regular basis here about how do we continue to change and adapt, and again, kind of going back to staying true to our values and our leadership principles and how we guide our people. And it's really about listening to your people and being able to respond appropriately.
And finally, Jean, I believe this is a question that was actually submitted by another former student, so that's why we're saving you for last.
Okay. I think my other panelists have really said it very nicely. From my perspective, it's really about system and process realignment in ways which is going to support that new mode of operation that the Vision for Change, in effect, was trying to support. because again, as I mentioned earlier, there is a tendency when you take a look at what causes change systems to fail, to attribute them often to individual resistance to change and those sorts of factors, whereas the data would suggest that what underpins an awful lot of the difficulties is this tendency to backslide back into former modes of behavior. So that sort of whole issue and challenge of getting the systems and processes aligned to support that new desired state is in making that operative and comfortable for folks and getting them engaged around that is pretty darn critical in terms of stabilizing and moving forward.
Wonderful. And that's it for all of the online questions that were submitted just now. Bob, over to you.
Right. Thanks, Nitya. I appreciate that. Just before we close, I'd like to just acknowledge the work that Silicon Halton has done and helping to offer this webinar. So, Rick, maybe you just want to take a minute if you have anything to add.
Yeah, sure, Bob. And clearly, this is a picture of me in the before times when our barbershops were open. I'm not as fortunate as Gene was. But yeah, thanks to everyone for attending. I hope you found value. I mean, while Silicon Halton, we largely focus on, technology events, we cannot not dive into the soft skills that make technology possible, nor, can we pretend that this pandemic is, not around us. So we're very happy to work with the town's economic development group, and thanks, to Wilfrid Laurier for helping us to put on this event. And to help us look at future events, I'd ask you to type a future topic or interest in the chat right now before you leave. And also, we're always interested, how we got good at promoting this event. So I'd also love to hear, a couple words on how did you find out about this event? Feel free to just put that in the chat as well. And thanks, Bob, for facilitating, and thanks, Nydia, for your help as well. Appreciate it. That's all. Back to you, Bob.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. So, that sort of brings us to a close. So thanks, Gene, Trevor, and Victoria for your participation. We appreciate your valuable insights, from the academic side of things. We need to be able to benefit from the insights that academia has, and as organizations and as a business community, sometimes we don't take the time to look at what we can learn from there. So we really appreciate that. And Trevor, the pivot that you accomplished with your organization was really impressive, and I hope it serves as an inspiration for some of the folks about, what it's possible to do. So, so thanks for everyone for attending and for your questions. I've heard it said that governments perform at their best during states of emergency, and organizing this webinar is a good example of how the town of Milton is supporting its business community. Thanks for also for those who contributed, when they got on to the, made a contribution that went to the Milton Food Bank when you registered. So thank you very much for that too.
I had one other comment I wanted to make if I could.
Sure.
If individuals are interested in following up and getting a little bit more information on some of the ideas that I was talking up to in terms of the change path model, the CPAs, the Certified Professional Accountants, have published a management accounting guideline that's available. The price is perfect; it's for free. And it's on their website, and I'm not sure if there's any way I can get the URL to the organizers of this webinar in a way that would allow that information to be shared if people wanted to download it for free. So just wanted to let you know there is that resource available.
That's great. Thank you, Gene. And also, there was a question, so just so that folks know that we'll be posting the presentation slides on the events page and of Silicon Halton. So you can definitely find it there. And again, my name is Bob Nagar. Have a good afternoon. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.